Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I am Brett. I'm going to be your host, as it were, tonight. And we also have a couple other guests with us here. We have...
I'm Justin.
I'm Joe. Just kidding. This is Cody.
Yes, Justin and Joe here with us tonight.
Yes.
And, sounds just like him.
Just do a Joe impression. I have terrible taste.
We are here. This will be our third entry into our Spooktober series, as we're celebrating all things spooky and Halloweeny. Tonight, we will be looking into our top 10 favorite scary video games, which should be a really fun topic. But before we get into that in detail, what have you guys been up to lately? Anything interesting?
I got my second COVID booster earlier this week, and it ended up getting me a much needed day off of work because it's been even more of a shit show than usual there. So I used that time in between splitting headaches to catch up on some of the shows I've been watching. So I finally caught up on Rings of Power and She-Hulk. So whenever we get to those, I'm ready. I've got notes. So I used my time constructively.
Yeah,
it's been kind of it for me. What about you two?
I have been spending again most of my time on the Halloween party. This is going to come out on Halloween morning, so you'll either see me alive or dead by the time this comes out. But I got a lot to do in the last week from right now and tomorrow, and then not much. The kids and I and Karen just finished season 1 of Stranger Things. We're rewatching that with them, so we just got through the last episode of that tonight with dinner. We caught up on She-Hulk, and then mostly been watching The Masked Singer and Lego Masters again, which has been a pretty fun season so far. I like that show quite a bit. The whole family does. That's it. I really want to get into some more video gaming, and I'm hoping when the Halloween stuff dies down, I feel like I've already set 4 goals for the next 2 months. But
yeah, sounds like you have very little time for yourself at the moment.
Exercising would be one, and I do want to get some video games in coming here as well. So
very nice.
Yeah.
Well, after being sick and having this cough for like literally 5 weeks straight, and like basically having lost my voice for like 3 to 4 weeks of that, I finally have it back, and well, I'm very pleased about it. I don't know if anyone else is too thrilled about it, but we'll see. I'll just have to live with my voice again.
We're happy to have you here.
Other than that, I finally after 7 months of owning the game, I finally beat Elden Ring. So that was it actually is what felt like a pretty big accomplishment, because it is definitely one of the more difficult games I've ever played. It's definitely very, very challenging. I didn't count, but if I just had to guess, it was probably like 25 attempts to beat the final boss. It was like I probably tried like close to 20 times, and then I went and like leveled up. I ground out like another 15 levels and came back and tried again, and still couldn't do it on the first few tries. But great game, enjoyed it. I definitely didn't do all the content there was in it, but yeah, I'm moving on. I'm actually started a playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077 again, because I never made it through my first run, mainly because the game got to a point where my PC hardware could not run it properly. There was like, they had an update, and something about the update like just screwed the game up completely on my PC, and I could not play it. But since then, I've upgraded a couple of my components, and now it runs like a dream. So
I wanted to ask you, which word did your kids pick up the most of you trying to beat the final boss? I'm just curious.
Thankfully, I did all my playing while they were asleep. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
Unless they absorbed it in their subconscious while they were sleeping.
Yeah.
I don't think they got any of those, but many curse words were flying about.
I can imagine.
My wife can attest to that.
There's nothing worse than a boss that's so friggin' hard. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I didn't ask. Are we doing an aggregate this week again?
We could try. I mean, I don't have anything set up, but I could.
Might be
I
fun.
could maybe throw something together. We'll see it. I just have a sense that probably this might be one of our more like wide range of answers for a list. But we'll see. I'll keep track of it. We'll see at the end.
Yeah. I was gonna say last week we had 50 movies and there was only 4 that overlapped.
Yeah.
Something crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Thankfully, Fontana did not submit a list of 30 this week, so that's good. So anyway.
All right. Well, as I said, we're our topic this week is going to be scary video games. And
Mario
being that
2.
that's right. We all of us here are obviously big fans of gaming, and we are all fans of horrors as well. So they
horrors.
just go together well. That's right.
Did you say horrors?
I mean, I didn't know. I didn't say that.
Did I make the wrong list?
You may have, yes. Yeah, you may have.
It's okay. You can go last.
We'll give you some time to sort that out.
I just had the DOA volleyball series. Let me restart.
Is there, guys? You guys want to add in anything just about how maybe just your how you how much you like it these video games, the horror genre video games, or anything like that?
Sure. For me, I don't think I really played what you could call an actual game in the horror genre until pretty far into my gaming career, probably by the time I was a teen or so. I do remember probably the first game that did scare me. It wasn't a horror game at all, but just with the way that the monsters moved and the technological limitations of the time, there were parts that were actually, very startling. That was Dungeon Master, which I played back on my Apple IIgs back in the day. It was a first-person dungeon crawler where, it's you play a team of 4 heroes that are going into this dungeon to try and stop the big evil guy. But everything moved in real time. So monsters would wander the halls and all that. So if you stopped at an intersection or you happened to just time it wrong, all of a sudden something could just appear in front of you because there was no animation for them moving. It would just all of a sudden, whatever was there would move from one square to the next, and all of a sudden, boom, it would be right there in your face. And that was probably the first horrific experience I had in gaming, and it left a mark. And once I actually got into the genre of horror, once that started becoming a thing, I really enjoyed what I found there. So
yeah, I would just say I feel like the video game genre or medium, I guess maybe it's a better word, is kind of divisive for people because my wife, I know, claims that she would never be scared from a video game because it's not real. So whatever she plays, she has no emotional reaction to it whatsoever. She's just whatever, jump scares don't get her, atmosphere, mood doesn't get her. And then there's other people who obviously are the opposite of that, where they wouldn't pick up a scary game because it's just too terrifying for them. I really enjoyed because the early games, I feel like they had to rely a lot on atmosphere and how the game design was set up to add in creepy music or tiny things. Even like Justin said, that's his game was kind of almost like an inadvertent jump scare, but got to him. Whereas when graphics started to get better and you had things that remotely looked like real things on the screen with you, then it started to have a different element of horror to it. And now, of course, games are almost photorealistic in some cases, and they just look really, really good, like you're playing a version of our world, and they're really graphically detailed, and that's another way that horror comes out. But I think I've always liked it just because I enjoy immersing myself in that character and pretending to be whoever that is. And I like letting my pulse heighten up and sync up with the music or the heartbeat of the character, or creep around the next corner just to see what's there, or listen to what's in the room before you actually walk into the room, and just kind of pick up what's happening. So I've always really liked horror games. I probably haven't played enough of them, and I know I've mostly been a Nintendo player, so I've probably had some great ones pass me by that I didn't get to play. I do know the Switch, I was looking through some lists for this episode. I know the Switch has actually quite a few of those classic games ported over now. So there may be some that I go back and play after Halloween's over here. So we'll see.
Yeah, you're just talking about just being immersed in a game, and that's absolutely how I like to play as well. It's just like, that's a big part of it, is just kind of like getting lost in these worlds that you're playing in. And it's a big reason why I play a ton of like RPG and like, things like that, where it's like story intensive and things like that. So yeah, same thing when I'm playing video game, like scary games, it definitely gets me, like you get your heart racing and like you really feel like the tension and all that. And it's one of those crazy things that, it shouldn't enjoy that, but it does have an enjoy. There's an enjoyable factor to it. Just getting scared once in a while.
Well, that's a good point too, because you do kind of feel like you become the character in these games. More so, I would say, than like I don't feel like I'm Mario jumping on a Koopa Troopa, or right. I don't necessarily. I mean, even like a first-person shooter, like I don't feel like I'm in that game actually shooting at someone, and occasionally maybe duck my head if like someone's shooting at me or something, but not like a scary game.
Yeah, well, I think that is what kind of sets horror games apart. I do have to disagree with your wife on this one, where I think games are like the quintessential horror experience, because you can read a book, you can always just put the book down, even get to a scary part and just leave it for later. You're watching a movie, you can close your eyes and whatever happens is going to happen. You can say, oh no, don't go in the basement, and whatever is the script it says, and whatever the cinematographer is shot, it's going to happen. A game, you're the one who has to go down in the basement, even though it's a terrible idea. And that is really, I think, the crux of what makes horror in gaming so poignant. Because it is a very immersive, very hands-on experience, where you have to do these things you don't want to do. You can't leave it in the hands of the characters you're watching. And I just love that.
Yeah, I think it's happening to you. It's not something you're not happening to somebody that you're watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just the element of choice I didn't think of before. When you control in the game, like even if there is a monster chasing you, like you still decide go left, go right.
Yep.
That's going to change the story versus, yeah, you're right, the rest of the visual mediums or even a book, it's kind of like whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, it was getting ready for this, and it was like really trying to think back to like my younger gaming years and trying to come up with were there any games that really like got me feeling scared. And I do have a couple on my list that we'll get to that in a bit, but it definitely is not nearly as immersive and getting a better reaction as these modern games now. And actually in the last few years here, I've been playing quite a few different scary games, whereas previous to say like 2020, I mean there was like a handful, but definitely in the last few years I've like really ramped it up. And like a big part of that has been where my wife and I actually play games together occasionally. And when we do, we often stream on my Twitch channel. But yeah, when we play games together, we often pick the scary ones, because those are the kind of it's like an experience we share more than like she wouldn't sit here and watch me play Elden Ring, because whatever, she just watched me go around and hack and slash some monsters. But yeah, something where she can actually get like fit and feel like she's in the story. And so yeah, we've played quite a number of scary stuff, and really enjoyed a lot of that.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah, and for anybody who really wants to check it out, my Twitch channel is aDragonReborn. No weird underscores or funny spaces or numbers or anything. Just aDragonReborn on Twitch.
There it is.
Shameless plug.
Are you streaming any games soon?
Maybe tomorrow.
Oh,
We did some last weekend, and I think we might tomorrow as well. So we definitely, being that it's October, and we like to do that as we're doing the Spooktober stuff here. We kind of do that as well. We kind of took a little break, and now we're like jumping back into it because there's we want to do all these kind of spooky games.
there you go. So for our audience at home, if you're listening to this, that happened 9 days ago. You missed it. But...
Jump in your time machine, and we'll be there for you.
There'll be more. I'm sure.
All right. So I guess it's about time we get into our list here.
Oh, yeah.
What we're doing the top 10, or each of us have a top 10 list put together. I think we all probably have a few honorable mentions as well.
Yeah.
But we're just going to go through and list our games from 10 to 1. Give a little bit of description, just some history about why we enjoyed it so much. And at the end, we'll kind of tally it up and see if they're came out with a consensus favorite between the three of us. I don't know how you guys ranked yours. And basically mine, I ranked on how emotionally, the feeling of fear was in the game for me.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, there's a couple parts where I kind of bent those rules a little bit to fit a game in, but we'll get that in a bit. But basically it was just is it scary? That's why that was the criteria for my list.
Yeah, I kind of took a similar approach. I mean, there are horror adjacent games that I've played that didn't have much in the way of scares, but were really good games. But because they didn't scare me, they didn't make the list. So I took a very, similar approach to you, it sounds like.
Yeah, I probably have some rule-breaking ones slightly this week, but I tried to stay on topic a little more for Justin's sake this week. So most of my honorable mentions would be the ones that would have been my out-of-the-norm elements here for our list tonight. So
okay.
Gotcha. All right, well, I suppose being the host here, I'll go ahead and kick some things off. So for my list, I had 4 honorable mentions, and 3 of those were games that I kind of alluded to before, where they were earlier console games, which I felt kind of deserved a bit of a place, just some recognition. But honestly, I wouldn't say that scared me all that much. So I had Doom, which is the classic, kind of, fighting the demons in the dungeon. And Castlevania, which was a great classic game, and it has all those horror elements in it, you're fighting vampires and zombie type things and all these monsters. So really, it's kind of like an early horror-ish genre game.
Yeah.
I had a more recent game called In Sound Mind, which is more of a psychological. It's not necessarily horror, but it it has some intense kind of psychological stuff in it. It doesn't really have jump scares too much, but it isn't pretty intense at times. And then I threw on their Ghosts and Goblins for the sheer terror of it being exceedingly difficult. I know I never beat that game, but just the fear of getting hit once and being losing your entire run was pretty actually kind of terrifying. So
I think Ghosts and Goblins is on the NES Mini that came out. I think
Probably.
I should try to do a save state game and just see if I could ever get through it. I don't know. That's so hard.
It is.
Man. Was that 4?
Okay. That's my 4. Yep.
That was 4. Okay.
You want next, or should I?
To go next?
I guess I'll go.
To shoot. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So I had, it looks like 4 for mine as well. And before going into this, I set kind of a personal rule where I would only have one game from a series on my list, and that includes honorable mentions. Otherwise, I have a feeling my list would have been very samey. So in the interest of variety, I tried to just...
I feel attacked.
I tried to experiment with a lot that are a bit off the beaten path, including some of these honorable mentions. So my first one is It's called Spirit Hunter NG. The NG stands for something that you find out as the game goes on. This is actually a visual novel, which generally not the scariest of game types, but there's a fair amount of interaction choices you can make and all that. But it, because of the format, the relatively static format, what scares there were sort of understated, but holy crap, did it have good monster designs. So if you don't mind a lot of reading, it's a worthwhile one to check out. It is the sequel to a game called Deathmark, but you don't really need to play that one to appreciate Spirit Hunter NG.
Ooh, I've actually played that one.
Oh, nice. So that's my first honorable mention. The second one is this came out a few years ago. It's called, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, Mundaun, Mundaun, which I think is a Swiss game, I want to say. Very interesting visual style. Like all the textures are hand drawn, so it's black and white, well, sort of off white, like a yellowish color, but like all the textures are like hand drawn in pencil, so it gives it a very unique look. Yeah. And it starts off on a good foot, really nice atmosphere, some creepy gothic vibes to it, and then the monsters show up, and the combat really kind of soured this one for me, because it never gives you a clear indication of where you're being hit from, because the monsters, the first ones at least, can all attack from a distance. You just, all of a sudden, your screen starts to kind of, close in around you, but there's no indication that you got hit from the left or right or anything. And by the time you're trying to like find a way to hide, chances are you've been hit a few more times and you're dead. I just really didn't like the combat, but the setup was really cool. Maybe maybe on the easier difficulties it's not as bad, but that kind of scuttled it. Third one is World of Horror, which takes the black and white aesthetic and pares it down to about as far as you can get. It looks like an old Mac game, but it's sort of a roguelike adventure game, visual novel type of thing, where depending on whatever run you end up with, you're trying to stop like an elder god from emerging, or a supernatural serial killer from killing again, or reality from ending, and it's a different experience every time. And this one also has like really good feature design. It's a little obtuse in terms of like the controls and how to use things at first, but once you figure out what you're doing, it's a really neat experience. And finally, this one might deserve a spot on the list, but I only started playing it yesterday when I was homesick. It's so I haven't beaten it, and I don't know exactly how pervasive the horror is, but it's called Observation, and I've
heard of that one.
Yeah, it's basically if you took 2001: A Space Odyssey, except you're playing hell, where something has gone horribly wrong on the space station, including wiping most of your memory, but you come back online and most of the crew is missing. There's like one human left who's trying to figure out what's going on, and you can basically decide how much or how little you want to help her until but it also becomes apparent pretty early on something else is at play here, and that's where the horror comes in. And I don't really want to spoil too much more, but it's a great setup. Especially the fact that you're a human playing an AI, trying to help an AI playing a human. It's an interesting bit of mind games going on there. Like I said, I haven't beaten this one yet, but what I've played has really struck me, and I could recommend it as a good game, if not necessarily a straight up horror experience.
Okay, cool. So I have 5 for my honorable mentions here, but as I said before we started recording, I'm going to go through these pretty quick, just in details. A couple old ones here, so I'm going to add those in. One is The Seventh Guest, which I wanted to play forever on a PC, but if you can believe it, my PC I had when I was a kid was not really even a PC. It was like a typing machine, basically. So I couldn't actually run that on my computer. I think I finally convinced like my cousin to get it, and I think we actually rented, if I recall right, a PC game from the store. And
wow,
that's a pretty fun little like early kind of full motion video type scenes with some little ghostly images in that one. Second one is my background tonight, which is an old PC game called Hugo's House of Horrors. And this was part of a, I believe, trilogy. As far as I know, they didn't make more of these beyond the 3, but our friend Chad And I used to play the Hugo series, the Jungle one, and then the House of Horrors and the Whodunit, which was comically not really a whodunit, but so this was kind of fun, just like a creepy family, creepy mansion, walk around, explore, point and click type thing, figure out what item did what. The next one chronologically here probably wouldn't be classified as horror anywhere, I would think, to look on a list online. But the more I thought about this one, I just really thought with its sound design and its sense of isolation that it is actually kind of a creepy game. And that's the original Metroid for Nintendo, which is not a horror game by any stretch. But the fact that you're like kind of deposited on this planet where you don't really know where you're going, don't exactly know, there's like some outline of a plot and like a text screen ahead of it or something, but just like finding new elevators to new worlds and hearing like super creepy music and finding occasionally a boss here and there was kind of creepy, very isolated, I guess is why I think that one is just so scary in particular. Just felt like you were by yourself, abandoned on the planet.
Yeah,
and then yeah, so and then the other two I have here a little bit newer. I put Resident Evil 4 on here just as an honorable mention. It's not really a horror game, but the parts with those like special enemies that had like the chainsaw or the claws or like those bigger, badder ones, like that was genuinely, you'd shit your pants if you turn around and saw the chainsaw guy like an inch away from you. And
the regenerators did it for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Those were good too. But yeah, so there's some really, really good jump scares in there, although it kind of strayed a little bit far from true horror in that one, I think. And then also not really too horror-y, but my last one here for PlayStation 4 was the first Walking Dead Telltale game, which is a different type of horror, just from like deciding your character's fate and really getting emotionally attached to those characters and then watching what ultimately could happen to them as the story goes on. So different type of horror again, but enjoyed that one quite a bit also.
Awesome. Yeah, so we didn't have anything on the same in those. Yes, I think that's going to be. I feel like that's going to be a kind of a. So it's going to be like the rest of the list potentially, but this time let's jump right into it here.
Yeah.
Number 10 for me actually is my current background. A game called Dark Deception. It's on the PC. It's a fairly recent game. I think it came out in like the last 2 years or so. It's essentially a modern version of Pac-Man, right down to this maze of hallways, and you're like gathering up these little bits of there's like sort of energy. I don't even know what they were, but literally just a trail of breadcrumbs that you run around picking up, with monsters in the maze chasing you down. So it's literally like Pac-Man, but Pac-Man if it was in the first person view in like this 3D maze, and all the ghosts were replaced with these mother effing cymbal banging toy monkeys. You're absolutely terrifying. Like literally those little bastards could be like around any corner. You just turn a corner, it's like boom, right there in front of you, because it's it's not a top-down view. You have no idea where they are. And so they'll just jump out at you and just chase you down. It's actually a really, really difficult game. I never even beat the first level. But the time I did spend in it was enough to give me nightmares. It was a terrifying experience. So nice. Yeah, cool. That was it was pretty cool. I don't know what else to say about it. That's essentially the whole game. There was a bit of story along with it, but that was basically the whole thing. So
neat. Yeah, one I'm not familiar with, or I hadn't been until today, so that's cool. Okay, I'll go next. So my number 10, I'm going to say right now, probably deserves to be higher on this list, but I realized I was playing it wrong. So, well, I'll explain in a sec. So my number 10 is called Visage. It is a first-person, almost photorealistic horror game. A lot of people kind of compare it to the ill-fated PT that was on the PS4 years and years ago, but more fleshed out. The reason this one isn't higher is because I felt like I was constantly just wandering around blind. It is one of those games where you're supposed to stay in the light. If you're in the dark, you start to lose your sanity. So, yeah, but I didn't mind that until it started to feel like I had no idea where I was going. But leading up to this, I did, watch a few, top 10 underrated horror game, videos on YouTube and looked at articles, and this one kept showing up. So I was like, okay, maybe maybe I'm missing something. So I watched, a little bit more into it, and I realized, this isn't a game that holds your hand at all. There were clues telling me where to go, but I was playing it like a video game and not like I was stuck in the situation I was in. So I wasn't seeing what I was supposed to be seeing. Case in point, there's a scene fairly early on where you go through an ordeal, let's say, and you wake up in your living room, and all of the covers to the light switches, seemingly for the entire house, are just like strewn on the floor around you, and it's like, oh, okay, shit just got real because I can't just keep turning the lights on like I used to. I didn't realize in my playthrough that they actually were trailing off, leading me somewhere. I looked around me and I'm like, okay, it's just this big pile of light switches. And I didn't think to try and watch, where they led. And being that this was my fault, I honestly think this game has a lot more to offer than I realized. So it's one to check out. Definitely just realize you have to be aware of your surroundings. You really have to pay attention. So that's my number 10. Should be higher, probably.
My number 10 is probably one of the more recent ones on my list. I know I've mentioned in the group this one when I played through it. I think I even put up a couple videos and photographs, but this is a game called Perception that came out either last year or this year. But the concept of the game in this one is that you play a girl who goes back to her family's house on some dark and stormy night, of course, and she is a blind protagonist. And so this is the concept of the game, where she uses more or less echolocation to navigate the house. There's obstacles that will prevent you from going in certain areas, and there are also effects that take place around the house, like if there's like water in a pipe that's going through, like that might register like steam, so that might register differently with her abilities. And her only item you get in the game, there are no weapons. The only thing you get in the game is her cane, which you can tap on various walls and different floorings and stuff, and it'll make different noises depending on what you hit it on. And then that'll light up kind of like a moving away from you style echolocation, but it only lasts for like maybe 5 seconds, I would say. So you have to kind of memorize what you saw of the environment in that 5 seconds, move to someplace else, and then try to basically do it again. The trick to it is, I feel like this game could not be scary if you didn't care about the mechanics, but if you try to play within the game's rules, it was really fun, because there was this enemy called, I don't even know what it was called, the Other or the Presence or something. And it's basically this monster that can hear you when you tap your cane every so often. So if you're running around tapping, then it shows up and basically kills you, and you have to start the game over, or I think go back significantly far or something like that. And another thing this game did, I think I mentioned, was I've never seen a game do this. The actual like physical dimensions of the house, in terms of like the length times width of the floors of the house and the different rooms and things. In this game, you also time travel through various ages, and the game somehow manages to recycle, to my knowledge, best I could tell, that exact space into different worlds and different time periods. Like you're at a carnival suddenly in like the 1920s now you're in the middle of like World War II battlefield, but like it recycles those areas in different ways and uses different door entrances and things to like make you feel like you're in a completely different world. But there were a few times that I was like, oh, this is like roughly where like the dining room would be, or like it's crazy room and level design in this one. But it is kind of fun. It's not that long of a game, maybe 10 hours, but it's a lot of fun. This is Perception.
That's not pretty cool. So basically when you're playing, like you have a more or less black screen the whole time? Is that
you have an entirely black screen a lot of the game, unless you're tapping. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Okay.
There are some things I think that showed up, like I mentioned, like maybe like an electricity jolt or like steam from like a water pipe or something. I think those might show up like in the blackness, but yeah, it's pretty creepy. And there were like things you could pick up as collectibles too. Like there were like creepy dolls and journals and stuff, and I found like maybe 2/3 of them, but I didn't explore enough, I guess, to find the rest.
Awesome. Yeah. I feel like I've heard that name, the name Perception, but I didn't know that that's what it was about. That sounds pretty cool.
I don't think it's a Switch exclusive to my knowledge, so it's probably out there for everything, I would think.
Yeah, it looks like it's on Steam at least. So cool.
All right. Well, number 9 for me is one I actually just played last weekend.
Ooh.
It is it's pretty crazy. I give you gentlemen a preview of what you would see in this particular game. So
sweet mercy.
Yeah. This game is called Lunch Lady. And it's basically it's designed as a first person online kind of co-op, kind of like collecting items so you can escape this place kind of thing. Like when you get the items gathered up, you can leave. I mean, you can play it just as well solo though, which is what I did, and had a pretty good hard time in it. Basically, the goal is to navigate a school at night, and you're searching for the answers to your upcoming exam. That's the premise. But you're trying to keep away from the lunch lady, who was this murderous and terrifying goblin here thing above my left shoulder. It's just absolutely disgusting to look at and terrifying. This thing is chasing you around. Basically, you're armed with just a flashlight and like a med kit if you can find one, because you can actually like you can take damage and like revive yourself if you happen to have a med kit on you. And as you can see, the lunch lady is like visually terrifying, but also like she makes these really like disturbing howls and like these screeching sounds when like she sees you. And when we hear that sound, you're like, oh shit, I need to run now. It's like it really like gets your blood going right away. But it's fun. You usually can like outrun her. You're actually like faster than her, but if you get like cornered in a room, you're toast at that point. So you have to like, it's always a thing like, oh my god, where's the door out of this room? Where's the next room? I gotta leave. You're like trying to run and just escape as much as you can. The one part about this game that it kind of is a little bit of actual like comic relief is if she does catch you, first you get this ugly mug in your face, and it's like disgusting and terrifying. But then after that, she bonks you over the head with a frying pan. It's like this comical like dong. It like made me laugh like every time. But yeah, that's the whole game. I actually I beat it the first time I played it. Or no, the second time. I lost the first time. The second time I played, I beat it. Playing solo, but it was a fun time, just run around getting chased by this thing. So
nice. Okay, so it's back to me. My number 9 is the oldest game on my list, and probably the first true horror game I ever played, Splatterhouse 3 for the Sega Genesis, which it is a traditional like beat 'em up with monsters and things, but the underlying story, to everything that's going on actually had some really dark and really disturbing moments, and you could have things go horribly wrong, and yet you'd have to keep pressing on. Like you play as the same character from the other two games, Rick. Your wife has been kidnapped, wife and son actually in this case, and so you try to rescue them from this big old mansion, which is a sprawling estate. I mean, there's a map, and there's a time limit as well. So the quickest path from where you start to the end often isn't a straight line, but in the back of your mind, as the timer is ticking down, you're wondering, do I have time to try and venture off to maybe get through an area with fewer enemies or better items, or should I just try to plow through the straightforward way? And as the timer keeps ticking down, events unfold. Like bad things start happening to your wife or kid or whatever, and it's just like amping up the stakes, trying to get you to go faster, fight harder to get there before they're dead. And it was the first time I'd ever encountered that sort of narrative where it's not just, oh, you kill the baddies, you rescue the girl, and you're good. No, this was actual horror in a 16-bit form, and just a solid beat 'em up, even to this day. So I think it deserves a spot.
Awesome. I know those games. I don't think I've ever actually played any of them though. I know the dude though. He's got like the jean jacket, cut off jeans, like jeans and the hockey mask type thing.
The Jason mask. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. All right, my number 9 is Animal Crossing. No matter what you do, you're in debt to a raccoon, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Terrifying.
Yeah, wait till you see the interest rates. Dun, dun, dun. My number 9 is actually for the PlayStation 5. What? Ooh. It is The Quarry that came out earlier, I think this year still. Time is weird now, but I think it was this year still.
Right. I think you're right. Yeah, this spring.
Yeah. This is a sequel to another game which is kind of popular, so I won't say that in case anybody has that one. But I shouldn't say sequel. I guess like a spiritual sequel to the other game. But this is, you're playing like a bunch of camp counselors. It's very narrative driven. There's, of course, not all is what it seems on this one, as you're kind of like stuck in the middle of nowhere, very isolated. And there is a large swimming pond, which was an old quarry, of course, set in the middle of the camp, hence the name. But this is just a super fun one. Your choices make a lot of difference with this. This is like a newer style gameplay, I guess, but like in some other games, your characters each can either live or die depending on choices you make, and so the ending will be very different depending on who makes it through and who doesn't. But a lot of tense moments in this one, like especially because this is also like a storytelling style of horror game. So like you'll play with, these two characters for 20 minutes and then suddenly you don't see them again for the next hour of the game. And you're like, well, what's happening to those two people as I'm playing with these other 3 sets of people in the meantime? So that's always kind of fun too. And then you go back and see like, oh, they were in this tense moment. I got to go back to this and see what's happening. Or, maybe go back to them and like the monster's gone. You're like, shit, where did the monster go now? Like he was with them, but he's not anymore. So this is a fun one. It's called The Quarry.
Cool. I heard there's like well over 100 different like permutations of endings you can get in that game.
Yeah, I know.
With all the characters being, I think like literally all of them could live or die.
Correct. And not only like the 8 heroes that you play as, like there's not too spoiler, but there's 4 or 5 villains in the game who can also all live or die. So It's quite a variety. When Dave and I played through this one together, and there was one like big bad, I guess, maybe like the main villain, I guess. We didn't even see in our game. Like he wasn't even in the story for our playthrough, but you have to trigger certain events to even have him appear in the story. And then that leads to a couple more branches. So I know he played a run where everybody lived and everybody died, because he keeps trying that. But he said it was interesting though, because it was very hard to actually get the everyone dies one. Like you assume what would kill them, and then they like survive that part, and you're like, son of a bitch.
Nice. Number 8 for me is a classic console game. It's Resident Evil 4, which Cody mentioned previously. So it is definitely a very kind of classic style of gameplay for the Resident Evil series. It's the third person view, and you're trying to collect. There's like items are scarce, and you don't have a lot of mobility. Like your character feels like they're always just like slowly walking everywhere, and while the monsters are chasing you down. So it always gets you going that way. But like as Cody mentioned, that really this game was not so much horror, because the enemies in the game were essentially like normal humans for the most part. They were like possessed or like cultist and like fanatical, and like all these people who were certainly trying to like harm you, and that was a reason to be frightened of them. But they were not like the traditional monsters of the earlier Resident Evil games in the series. So perhaps not like straight horror, but I did want to put this on the list because it's the one that I remember the most. I had it on GameCube, and I played the heck out of that, and it was just a really well put together game. Like the controls were great, the voice acting was really good, and just the they improved the gameplay of the Resident Evil series, with this one as well, which made it a lot more kind of user friendly, whereas the earlier games kind of felt a little bit clunky at times. But yeah, I just want to put this one out there because it was just one of the best in the series, and there it is, number 8, Resident Evil 4.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great one.
Okay, my number 8 is one I only discovered in paging through my backlog a couple weeks ago. It's called, well, it has a bit of a generic title, Horror Tales: The Wine. And I never would have heard of this, probably never would have played it if I hadn't picked it up on sale for like $3 or something like that. But I'm glad I did. It's sort of, the setup is very gothic in that it centers around a plague. I think it's supposed to take place in Spain, or some Spain adjacent European country, where well, it's never really named, but there's this plague called the Devil's Fevers that is broken out, and it drives people insane. It makes them start committing atrocities, and a quarantine has been set in place to try and contain it. But there's this rumor, and whether the rumor is true or not is up for debate, that there's this wine made by the specific winery in the capital that can cure it. So you play as someone whose family is sick with the plague, you are breaking into this winery, this estate that's also on lockdown, trying to find an intact bottle of wine to bring back to your family to cure them. Whether or not it's even a true cure, is up for debate. And the fact that you're banking all of your hopes on this one potential source of salvation, it's really kind of poignant. And they do some really interesting stuff. It's a lower budget game, but there's only I think 2 enemy types in the entire thing. But they do a lot of really neat things with the layouts, like corridors that you'll be walking down one and you start getting chased, and when you turn around, it's a completely different layout behind you, which leads to the question of, is there something supernatural going on here, or are you infected? Are you going insane yourself? And seeing that develop is really cool, and it does feel kind of like an old Edgar Allan Poe story with a lot more action. And the only thing that's keeping me from putting it higher on the list is some of the puzzles, where there are certain puzzles during the course of the game where you have to try and solve them while you're being chased. And after a while, I mean, you once you figure out how to kind of maneuver and get around what's chasing you, it starts to become more tedious than scary. That's the only thing that's keeping this from being higher up. But the story is great. It looks surprisingly good for being a lower budget project, and all I'm going to say is the ending is just spot on. But if you can deal with the shortcomings, it's a surprising hidden gem. I would highly recommend it.
Is this PlayStation or PC?
I played it on PC. It might be available on consoles too. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
Just so I have it written down here accurately, is it Horror Tales: The Wine?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Okay, my number 8 is from, you guessed it, yet another PlayStation device. It's PlayStation 2's Fatal Frame 2, The Crimson Butterfly. I would be lying if I told you I remembered a ton about this game, but the Fatal Frame series was fun just from if you're listening and don't know this, I'm sure Justin at least would have a better description of this, but essentially you have this magic camera that lets you see the dead more or less, and you, instead of attacking and using traditional items in these games, you take their picture, which is truly scary way to end people, or at least it worked for Princess Diana. But anyway, are we still on? Okay, yes, but in this one, you're basically walking around some, very scary, creepy Japanese villages, and ghosts pop out of various places all over the place, different types of ghosts, and it's kind of creepy because it's ghosts, but actually for especially that age of graphics, they looked pretty good for a ghost per se, and just something about having having to fight them through this camera lens is like kind of fun about the whole thing. Like I feel like a lot of games now kind of substitute like your cell phone screen more or less in games for that, where you're like looking at your enemy through a cell phone, but this was with the camera obscura, which was always a fun time here. So throwback here, this is Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly.
Nice. Number 7 for me, this game called The Forest, which is another fairly recent game. It kind of at its core, it's really just like a typical kind of survival game where you are you're kind of stranded and you start out with nothing and you have to like build up and like forage for items and gather materials and things so you can build a place to sleep and protect yourself and all these things. That's until you run into the nearly naked cannibal psychopaths that inhabit this island. And then things take a turn. So basically the story is that your plane crashes on this island. You kind of like wake up briefly and you see your son being carried off by this something. Then you like pass out again, but later when you wake up again, then you're essentially trying to find your son and rescue him. But what kind of made this a little bit for me, it was kind of a negative, was you as Justin was kind of saying before about Visage kind of like not holding your hand. The Forest really has no hands. It's just like, here you go. Go, you're off. Good luck. And so that was a little bit off-putting for me, and then it gave me zero direction on what to do. But it was, the cannibals kind of just appear at any time, day or night, and they will just like wreck your crap. They will break down your base and everything you got. And then like they always like attack in groups, which makes it challenging, and there's like this heart pounding kind of thing. So, and then you could actually like make progress. Like you could actually just like spend the entire game just like gathering things and just building a base, if that's how you wanted to play the game, and just like forget about your son. But to actually progress through the story, you have to go into the many caves on this island, which are extremely dark, which was kind of another off-putting thing for me. Like they're so dark that you can't, like you're holding a lighter and it's like realistic amount of light. Like if you imagine like walking in the cave and holding a lighter in front of you, and how everything would be just completely pitch black except for like 3 feet in front of your face. That's what the game is. And so like navigating caves is difficult, and things will just like jump out at you out of nowhere. But it does make it scary, and that's certainly one of the things that put it on the list for me. So Forest hit number 7.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
Yeah, I might have to check that one out myself.
Yeah, there's a sequel, I think, releasing next year.
Okay.
Sons of the Forest.
Ooh.
I think it's on PC. I don't know if it's on a console. Yeah, it must be on consoles because I have friends. Yeah, it's on consoles too, I think.
Okay. Cool. Okay. My number 7 is, it has horror elements. They aren't there all the time, but when they are, they're really prominent. So that's why it made the list. A cyberpunk thriller called Observer, not to be confused with Observation, completely different game.
I still haven't played this one, but I keep thinking about it.
You really should. It is amazing. So it is a first-person murder mystery set in kind of a retro cyberpunk future. And you play a detective who I believe is voiced by Dolph Lundgren. I'm actually looking that up right now.
I think it's Rutger Hauer, isn't it?
Yes, Rutger Hauer, yes,
yeah.
Who actually has a bit of a history with cyberpunk murder mysteries, considering he was in Split Second. But anyway, so you get sent to this like rundown tenement, pretty much, just a ratty apartment complex where a murder's been committed, and you have to try and figure out what's going on. The problem is you have substance abuse issues, which start to affect your visions of reality. So you don't quite know a lot of the time if what you're seeing is real or not, or all in your head. Also, it's a cyberpunk future. Everyone's got cyberware. One of the things you can do and have to do is like connect to people who you think are suspects, and occasionally corpses, to try and go through their memories and see, if you can piece together what's going on. And some of those, memory jacking sequences are just really freaky, really really surreal, and incredibly creative. It is one of the most distinctive games I've ever played. Like I said, the horror isn't front and center, but there are times you'll be chased. There are times you'll have to sneak through areas where something you don't know what is out there. And yeah, it is just a great cyberpunk story, very unique setting, and an incredible game overall. So highly, highly recommended. It's available on consoles and PC, including last-gen consoles like the PS4 and Xbox One. So,
okay.
Yeah,
I just checked it out. It's still $30 for the Switch. I was like, maybe I'll make the second on-air purchase here, but I don't know if I'll drop $30 on that right now. But okay, my number 7. Stop me if you've heard this before. This is coming from a PlayStation machine. What's happening tonight? Oh my gosh!
Oh man, where's the real Cody?
I know, right? This is called Resident Evil 7, which was spooky, but probably made the list in particular because we played this one in virtual reality. So this was this was pretty fun to actually like look around the corners of the rooms and like see if the crazy hillbilly inbred crazy people were coming after you, and have like the fights right in your face, like literally in your face. It was also really fun because the person with the headset on, because I played this one through with Dave, also could see like more detail and things that the person watching the TV couldn't see. So like the person playing the game would like stop walking, and whichever one of us was like sitting on a couch would be like, "Why'd you stop moving?" And they'd be like, up ahead. There's a so that was kind of fun too to watch it from that perspective. But this is a fun one too. Just it's not that different in all honesty from like Resident Evil 4 through 6. It's got the like kind of, well, this was a little more with the goggles on. It was a little more first person-y, I guess, than even those. But essentially, this was a giant compound, which was a nice little twist on like the Resident Evil Mansion formula. It's like this crazy hillbilly compound with all these buildings and crazy monsters, and the family was really creepy. And like, the part from the trailer, at least, where they have you like at the dinner table is very, very unsettling. And like,
I can't imagine that scene in VR would be awful.
You feel like they're talking to you. It's pretty cool, and has a good nice little variety in the family of villains as well. So, but it may or may not have made the top 10 had I not played it with the headset on. So, but that's going to be my number 7.
Yeah, that is a good one. All right, number 6. I have a game called Little Nightmares 2. It's kind of like it's like a puzzle platformer, basically. It's like a horizontal side scroller with like some, you have to like unlock things to like get to the next areas. You have to like find your way around through like stuff. It's actually a little bit kind of whimsical at times, but like it absolutely gives you the vibes of being like in a child's nightmare at other times. And it visually, it looks like you're in a Tim Burton movie. It like easily you could be like it's a cross between, say, like Nightmare Before Christmas and Beetlejuice, between like the animation style and like the character design.
Okay.
And it kind of has almost like a stop motion animation kind of feel to it as well, because it's like the creatures move around, but their movements aren't like necessarily smooth, which kind of gives it a little bit of that extra like weird, creepy feeling. Sure. And they're all like often have like these like blobby, grotesque features as well, which you might associate with like a Tim Burton thing. Huh. Like for example, this picture I just threw behind me here, this teacher, her neck stretches out to be like 30 feet long.
Oh.
She chases you around the room with just her head. And yeah, it's really creepy. There's lots of characters like that. This guy like climbs on the ceiling, chases you around, and there's another fight where it's like in a pitch dark room with just like a spotlight in the middle, and like this thing like jumps out from the dark at you. The story is like it's interesting because there's only like a small handful of audio lines, like actual words in it, but you still get a good sense of what the story is, and it's very dark. like by the end you're like, oh my god, that's what this was about. And you know, it kind of leads into like kind of the disturbing area as well, and there's like some like disgusting visuals along the way as well. So pretty enjoyable. It's Little Nightmares 2. We played it on PC. I couldn't tell you if it's on consoles or not.
This is yeah, they have it on consoles. This one pops up for me once in a while. I know in the like eShop to like check this game out and stuff. I've seen this on a lot of lists too, so I'm glad to hear you give it a good recommendation.
Yeah.
It's not. I would say we probably beat it in like 4 or 5 hours. It's not a terribly long game.
Okay,
but it's worth it. It's only like $15 or something.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's a series I've never gotten into, despite the fact that I do like the aesthetic of it. So I might have to give those a shot. Okay, which brings us to my number 6, Dead Space, the original. The sequels were they also had a lot to offer, but for me, the original Dead Space is just it's almost a perfect horror, sci-fi horror game. Where anything that could go wrong in it, and every time it feels like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, something else goes wrong. And so because it always feels like the stakes are building and building and building. But for those of you who haven't played this, the basic plot synopsis is you play as an engineer aboard what's called a planet cracker, which is like a ship that yanks a giant chunk out of a planet to use for mining purposes. And this particular ship has found something very, very bad that has led to an infection of the crew, all like 900 of them or so, and you're one of the only survivors trying to find your way out. And the gimmick of this series is that you can't just, shoot the monsters in the head and have them go down. That doesn't work. You have to dismember them. You have to cut off their legs. You have to cut off their arms. Otherwise, they will just keep getting back up and, clawing their way after you. And having to do precision aiming while you're being, swarmed or stalked by these grotesque, space monstrosities, it's a very tense experience. And like I said, the story is really kind of what kept me going, because it's like, oh, okay, you can send out a distress signal, which gets the attention of a military ship that's on its way, and it's like, okay, help is finally coming, and then it's like, wait, at some point you ejected one of the monsters through an escape pod to get it out of the way, and they're picking up the escape pod. No, oh crap, this could not possibly get worse, and then it gets worse on top of that. And it's just I loved the entire story arc of this game. They are remaking it. I think the remake comes out in December sometime, but I'm not sure it needed it. The original is just fantastic as it is. It still looks good to this day. I think it's the first game I ever played that was in 1080p, and a lot of the effects still hold up. So, but whatever iteration of it you decide to play, I definitely recommend it. Awesome action sci-fi horror.
Hi, Justin, Nintendo Gamer here. What's 1080p? Just kidding.
I think that's how much the Switch costs in England.
While I was looking on some websites, there was a review for a game that said it ran beautifully in 1008p, and I was like, "Wait, what? What the? That was 1008p." Anyway, all right. My number 6
could squeeze
game.
the last 72 out.
It's not quite that good, but my number 6 game is my new background here, as I'm not changing them as frequently as Brett, but this is a game which I believe years later was released for the other consoles, if I'm correct in this, but originally was a Nintendo exclusive for the Wii U, that ill-fated system that had a few hits on it. And this is Zombie U, or as it was later called, a much better name, just Zombie. Anyway, This is a sweet game. It is, what do I want to say? Like, it's more open world than the Resident Evil games, but it's not quite like some of the AAA titles, which have total horror and open world roaming elements. You were a little constricted on where you could go with this one, but different paths through London would open up. The setting was really fun just because it wasn't the United States and it wasn't Japan. It was London, which was cool. It really reminded me of the movie 28 Days Later, where you're like one of these survivors and scour the city for things. You wake up in like I think like a subway station, if I recall. But this game did some really unique things that made it awesome. So first you were being guided by kind of like this voice over radio for the longest time. You didn't know who it was necessarily. So there was definitely an element of, should I trust this guy or shouldn't I? Called himself the Prepper, I believe. And he was the one who was kind of like helping you navigate through London as best he could from his compound. So it was definitely a, is this guy good? Is this guy bad type thing? There was a lot of unique items in this game. So most of the time it was best to go in guns blazing and like fight the zombies, but you had other options here. Like lumber was definitely one of the major resources. So you could barricade doors instead of choosing to fight. You could barricade yourself in different places or try to prevent different routes for the zombies from actually getting through. That could come back to backfire against you later. If you then needed to get through that particular area later, you'd have to like rip your own barricade down. Well, actually, the two most unique things I think about this game that I hadn't seen done in horror games or really any game before was, number one, if you can see my background here, you, just like in the Resident Evil games, had like an inventory system, but in this game, unlike any I've ever seen, the game doesn't pause when you go into inventory or to search things you find in the real world. So on the Wii U, you had the second screen, which was awesome for this. So I don't know how they do this on the other systems now that I think about it. But while you were looking at your inventory on your control pad, like the shit on the screen was still moving at you. So it was kind of like this race to like look through this trash can to see if there was anything good in there and pick up a couple of cans of tuna and a Band-Aid while there's like two monsters coming down the hallway. And a lot of the time you could kind of minimally, negate that by killing everybody in the room with you, and maybe you were safe for the time being then, but you never knew for sure if anything was going to break in or just happened to roam down that hallway or into the room you were in. So that was really cool, I thought. And the second thing this game did, which I had not seen before in games I had played, this one might be more prevalent in the rest of the horror games, but you played as a character and it was permadeath for your character. So every time you were killed, you lost everything you had. And your character died, and then you restarted as a new survivor in like a different part of the subway or someplace else. But you could basically use like a homing beacon to like find your old self. So you actually found your old character, and then you had to like mercilessly beat your old character with a 2x4 to kill them to take the backpack, which had all your shit, So that was not that you became really attached to the individual characters, but it was just kind of unique to be like, that's me. Sorry, I died right here. And then kill them because you needed the stuff. Like there just wasn't enough, inventory around London to get over that. But there was also this weird thing in the game where I don't know if you actually could play it online, but you were connected online while you played it, and periodically other people's dead characters would also wander through your map. And so like you could find a random guy that had like 2 guns in his backpack and a health pack and like had some stupid, big penis 23 name or something, and you could kill them and then you would get all their stuff also. So you kind of like everybody benefited by you dying, if that makes sense. But
it's like a zombie version of them walking around.
Yeah, right. Yeah, correct. You're not actually killing the character. It was like where they had previously died, which, could be any point in any level. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
There are a couple turns the game takes towards the end, which are super fun, but kind of bizarre, only in a video game type stuff. So that part was okay, but not great. But I just wish it had been a little bit longer. If I recall, this one only plays in like maybe 15 hours if you play straight through. The world could have been a little bit bigger, but this one had a lot of potential. So I don't know if they'll ever do another one or not, but it was great.
Cool. It does sound like a lot of cool features to it. As far as all the kind of gimmicky stuff that Nintendo has on their consoles, typically, that inventory management thing sounds like really a cool option.
Yeah,
it was pretty fun.
Yeah. All right, I got number 5 here. We're in the top top half. So
yeah, I'm looking at the top half.
If I move my head, you are. So these guys already know what my number 5 is here because I changed my background again. But number 5 for me, Resident Evil 8, which again was a pretty standard kind of Resident Evil kind of survival horror gameplay. Didn't stray far from the main formula of it. It certainly does. Like in the newer games, you definitely have more mobility and you feel like you're actually like in control of things a bit more and you have some more options. But the modern graphics really do a lot to kind of add to the immersion, including like just the gore and like the disturbing things you see that are actually disturbing. And so these newer Resident Evils are really good. Like I say, 7 was, I never played 7, but I've watched it. And 7 was great as well. But it definitely, there are parts of this game that are perhaps like more intense and not so horrifying, maybe. But it definitely, the amount of extreme like anxiety that you get in parts of this game. So like I include have the feeling of anxiety. That's like a major part of horror to me as well. So even if like the visuals weren't always necessarily like terrifying, it certainly did feel like it was. And another thing that this game does like really well is it kind of leans into different forms of horror. So like you've got like vampires, you got werewolves, you got like this grotesque giant baby thing that chases you through this house at one point.
Oh god.
There's this one area that has like these massively creepy living dolls. That one was like the biggest nerve-wrenching thing for me. Like there's this gigantic like 4-leg pus monster thing. There's a boss fight. So there's lots of different ways that it kind of throws you into the horror aspect. But the story is really good. Maybe not great, but it's really good. And certainly just some aspects of the story itself are pretty like gruesome and terrifying as well. And like the end boss of this fight, the end boss of the game, it's kind of like, well, not the end boss, but like the fight right before the end boss is like, it's very unique to Resident Evil games. Like I've never seen a fight like this in a Resident Evil, which was pretty cool to see. It just kind of like further kind of emphasizes how the range that the game has, and the way it goes. But I really enjoyed it. This was another one that my wife and I played together, and we both really enjoyed that. So Resident Evil 8.
Nice. Okay. Leading into my top 5, number 5, The Evil Within 2, which is a divisive game because it does sort of change tones midway through, but I honestly think its strengths outweigh its weaknesses. It does help to play the first one before this, but it does stand pretty well on its own. So you play as Detective Sebastian Castellanos, from the same character from the first game, who learns that his daughter, who he thought was dead, is actually still alive and is hooked up to a machine that is building kind of a collective consciousness from everyone who's hooked up to it. And it is also built by people sort of behind the events of the first game. And initially he's just angry at this revelation, like, give me back my daughter and whatnot, but they can't, because if they disconnect her, she'll die. Also, the machine, its readouts to the real world have gone blank. So the only way to try and save his daughter is to agree to help this corporation, basically figure out what went wrong and go into this shared delusional unconscious environment yourself, try to find your daughter, get her out, and survive the whole thing. Now, most of the game, at least the first half, takes place in this imaginary town that's in all these people's heads called Unity, and it is an open world experience, which I usually am kind of hit or miss when it comes to horror, but this game does it right. It rewards curiosity, it rewards exploration, where, you know, resources are very limited in this. So, you know, any bullets you can scrounge, any healing items you can scrounge, you need to search and try to find these things. And sometimes you find more than what you bargained for. Like, one of the scariest early moments in the game was something I think that was entirely optional. I was just poking around in a building. It didn't have any indicators on the map. It didn't, you know, I just thought maybe I can find some ammo here or something. And all of a sudden reality shifts around me, and there's this thing that just phases through a wall that bullets don't seem to hurt, that kills me in one touch, and I have to try to find my way out of this entirely new space that I'm trapped in, and, you know, without attracting this thing's attention. And I think that was entirely optional because it was just a random building that I stumbled into. Similarly, there's stealth kills in this game to try and save ammo. And the first time I snuck up behind a creature and stabbed it in the head, mind you, and it just kind of lurched forward, then turned around and looked at me, I damn near shat my pants. I mean, it has a lot of really good scares in it, and it's just a fun game in general. So yeah, it's a very Evil Within in general is an underrated series, so check it out, both of them, if you get the chance.
Wow, the overlaps on these is crazy so far. Crazy. All right, well, starting my second half of the list here, number 5 for me is probably, well, I got a couple rarer ones, I guess, left on here, but I don't know if either of you have ever played this one. This is a game that probably made my list because I exclusively played it in the dark. And I was just checking the actual game length on this. They claim it's like 18 hours, which is apparently bullshit, or I really sucked at it, one of the two, which is entirely possible as well. But this is Shadow Man 64.
Oh, yeah.
Which I just poured hours and hours and hours and nights into. This is a game where you play a guy named Mike, and you have the ability to traverse between the worlds of the living and the worlds of the dead. And as you're trying to, I think, like collect souls or some crap, and you're also fighting like the demons and Hellspawn in the Hell world. The living world I don't recall all that much, except for one part which I'll mention in a second, but the like hellscape of the game was pretty damn impressive, just like with flowing rivers of magma and like wells of blood that you could jump into and waterfalls that you could swim up, and like the most bizarre types of enemies that you're fighting in the demon world. And it was really, I don't know if it's classified as a Metroidvania, but you would get essentially a new power every once in a while. But the problem was, like, you'd have to go back through the like previous 10 hours of the map to like figure out where you're going to use that at. And I feel like that normally would piss me off, but for some reason this just hit me like when I was in college at the right time, and I had fun going to look for that. And you'd find like, oh, here's this new thing that's open that I can do now. And then like that led to another area, and eventually you'd get all the other stuff and keep upgrading. But the cool thing was, as scary as the like actual hell version of the world was, then when you met a certain number of requirements or something would trigger, I think 5 times in the game, you were rewarded by like being pulled out of the hell world back into the real world, where you guessed it, you got to do gladiatorial combat in like a warehouse with a real serial killer. Like, this thing is off the rails, man, because somehow they were like creepy as hell, because they would like run around these hallways and crap, like screaming and laughing at you while they're like, and then you were like doing like bullet combat, and like it was a whole different type of game than you were doing when you were on the hell side. But the whole thing altogether was very like, you didn't really know where you were going. Everything was dark. Like you were technically the hero, but like didn't even really feel like your guy was entirely good himself. So there's just a lot of fun elements at play in this one, and exploration I had a ton of fun with, probably more than I should have, to be honest, but it was really enjoyable. So Shadow Man 64.
Yeah, that was one that came to mind when I was trying to think of older console games that I played, but didn't quite make the list. Okay. Number 4, I have Phasmophobia, which is another fairly recent game. I think it's exclusively for PC. I don't know that for sure. But it's basically like a ghost hunting simulator. So it'd be like exactly what you would see on those shows on like Discovery Channel where the guys are like going into the house and they got like all their their gear, their EMF readers and like spirit box and all this other stuff. It's literally the exact same thing. So the goal of the game is to you're going to this supposedly haunted house, and you're there to figure out what type of ghost is haunting this place. So you're walking around in this dark house with like just flashlight and whatever other equipment you bring in with you, and so there's this constant like haunting background noise, like straight ripped out of like Paranormal Activity movies, like the sound that's in the background when like the actual activity is happening. Like it's basically that same thing, which for whatever reason is like one of those sounds that really kind of like gets me a bit. And so essentially you're like trying to gather evidence of what type of ghost this is. And then like occasionally that you will piss the ghost off and it will like go into like attack mode. And if it catches you, you're dead. You're like gone. But it definitely is very, very creepy. It's like kind of, it's very quiet, like there's basically just that background white noise and then like an occasional like sound within the house. But it's like up to 4-player online co-op as well, which makes it does take a bit of the horror out of it when you're playing with friends and you're like goofing around with each other. And there's things like you literally like ask the ghost questions like with your actual voice and the microphone.
Oh, that's cool.
And then it like will respond, if you ask the proper questions. And so there's always like if you're playing with friends that like, these people just say like the stupidest things, like, are you taking a poop right now? Like whatever the hell you want to do. But it's a really cool game. There's like, there's over like, I think now, because they've really updated the game a lot. I think at this point there's like over 20 different ghost types. There's like demons, poltergeist, revenant, yokai, oni, like all this kind of stuff. But really cool game. Feels pretty immersive and pretty enjoyable.
Cool. All right. My number 4. I know Cody was just complaining about the lack of redundancy here, the lack of similar picks. Well, happy to break that trend because my number 4 is Fatal Frame 2, which is a really atmospheric, really creepy horror game. Going a little bit more into the plots, it centers around a town with a disturbing history regarding twins, which sounds a bit odd, but it's basically saying too much more than that would kind of spoil things. But twins don't fare well in this town, and you and your twin sister, and of course, bumble your way into it, and she goes missing. You have to try and find her, and the town is haunted, to Sunday and back. And the whole camera mechanics are really cool. There are some ghosts I think you can only see through the camera, so you might hear them, but not be able to see them until you've got your camera up and ready. Focusing was really important in this series, where you could just like whip your camera up and take a shot and it wouldn't do much. But if you focused on like the ghost's weak points, it would do more damage. Film came in different grades that would, have different effects. It might slow them. It might disorient them a bit and allowing you to get away. It was just a really creative set of mechanics and a great high stakes horror story with a very Japanese flair to it. The series in general, really solid. I think there's a new one coming out sometime next year. But yeah, Fatal Frame 2 is the best one that's out so far.
Have you played Maiden of Blackwater? How is that?
That one I haven't played yet. It is on my Steam wish list, but I've heard very mixed things. So of the ones I played, the first 3, 2 is the best.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 4 is another Wii U game, actually. So this was a download-only game on the Wii U, so you may not have even played this or maybe even heard of it. It's called Capital Storm, and this is like more of a sci-fi dystopian game. But in this game, you make an oath and then you try not to not keep it. I guess you gotta keep your oath. But it's kind of a fun game because you actually play the monster in this game instead of the hero. So that's cool. There's like you and your boys and you're proud. And the ultimate goal of the game is like to steal a podium in a minimally protected building. So it's a fun one, but definitely check that out. So that's my number 4, Capital Storm.
Okay.
Nope. Hold on. No, sorry. It says Until Dawn. It says Until Dawn's number 4. My bad. Got these new glasses. Until Dawn for PlayStation. I don't even know if this was 4 or 5. This was my number 4 game. 4. Okay. This is similar to The Quarry, which I had mentioned earlier, where you play some people that are isolated in a pretty remote setting. This one goes off the rail in some entirely different ways, though. You again have permadeath with your characters. But I know how'd this one go? I think Dave had played this one already and then invited me over to do a playthrough by myself while he watched. And when the game got to like the twist in the game, I did not see that coming at all. Like I don't know if you two have played this or not, but I should say, assumed there was like some kind of serial killer running around doing these acts in the game. And spoiler, non-spoiler, it's not. It's something else that's going on here. So this one was really fun, though. Just, again, had fun dialogue and exchanges between the characters. And again, like the idea of like your story could change based on who lived and who died was kind of interesting. So this is Until Dawn, which I guess technically is a same series as the other one, but not. So I didn't break the rule.
Very nice. It was about halfway through that other one. I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound real. Number 3, I have, going back to a classic, Silent Hill, which is definitely one of the the original classics. It's kind of like in a similar vein as Resident Evil, but really kind of takes things to a much more disturbing level, I would say. It's it gets like a third person kind of survival horror, and one of the things that they did with this game was they always had like everything was like really foggy, and they essentially like put that into the game to kind of cover up the limitations of the graphic, the hardware. But it actually added to the environment and like the atmosphere a lot. So it actually was a win-win for them. But this game was just for an earlier the console games, I say that graphically it was hard to have things that looked on screen that actually like frightened you. But this game, went down some really creepy roads, and so that is what brought it out where the visuals couldn't quite get you there. It's like, what exactly was Pyramid Head doing with those mannequins in that room? We probably never know, but it certainly asked the question. So okay. Silent Hill, number 3.
Okay. And how about that Silent Hill conference earlier this week? Like 3 new games, a new movie, a remaster. I mean,
that's pretty exciting.
Never thought I'd see the day. All right. My number 3 is another one that's already been mentioned, Resident Evil 7. Also because I played it in VR. Because let me tell you, there is a huge difference between seeing like a psycho with a knife coming at your, at your character, even in first person on a screen, versus having them coming at you with that knife, slicing it at your face. It really is a different level of horror. And VR horror is really something I should experience more of because it is a lot more visceral. And like Cody said, I'm not sure if this is a game I would have rated anywhere near as highly if I just played it on a screen. But the VR experience it is creepy as heck, very immersive, and it just highly recommended if you get a chance to play it that way. Takes a different track story-wise than some of the earlier games, and does that even more so. But it's a very solid horror game, and one I can easily recommend.
All right. My number 3 is my poster boy back here, which is a Crimson Head from Resident Evil 1 Remake. Get it? It's RE, like Resident Evil Remake. Get it? They capitalized that part in case you missed that. Remake for the GameCube. So this breaks my entry of not having 2 from the same game series. So there goes that. But I love the series in general. This one was most notorious, I suppose, probably because it had upgraded graphics over the original version, and also these bad boys on the screen right here, which I was just looking for that picture, and I found a website that ranked the scariest enemies in any horror game ever, and these guys came in at number 2, right behind the improved Mr. X Tyrant from the remake of Resident Evil 2. But essentially, for our audience, if you don't know, Resident Evil games, you walk around, you shoot lots of zombies and other various creatures, but mostly zombies. This remake they did for the GameCube came out, and they basically not only polished up the graphics, but said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if when you killed a zombie, it wasn't really dead for the game? And so they introduced this new type called Crimson Heads, who look like they just have a really bloody face. So if you stabbed a zombie to death or shot it to death or even blew it up to death with like a rocket launcher, that sucker would be back alive, if not the next time you went down the hallway, the time after that. So they added this whole layer to the game where either you had to find semi-limited and semi-obnoxiously located gasoline cans and light them on fire with your trusty lighter so the body actually burned so it couldn't come back. Or I believe if you shot its head off, I think they also died for good. So there were still a few ways you could get rid of them. But, you know, sometimes in these games, Brett kind of alluded to like the old tank controls. There were times when like if you walked into a hallway with like 4 or 5 zombies in it, you were just like, I gotta get the hell out of here. So you just, you know, maybe throw something and run, or shoot, run. And well, if you happen to have ran through that too quickly and then came back to that hallway forgetting about it later, because these games often have you backtrack through the same rooms multiple times, you might end up in a hallway where there's now 2 or 3 red zombies in there instead of the normal ones, or in addition to the normal ones. And oh, did I mention they also have like triple the speed and also have like claws that slash at you on top of it. And so these things are really like, if you saw one of these in the room, you were like, shit, and had to react very quickly or leave the room because they still weren't smart enough to actually turn a doorknob. So, but that's probably the biggest thing. I really enjoyed this one for the GameCube when it came out, and had not had a chance to play the first one in its entirety before this. So I was kind of spoiled that this was like my first time playing through Resident Evil 1. So that's my number 3 pick.
Very cool. I know a lot of these, they're basically remaking all of the early Resident Evils, kind of like in series here, and a lot of the new remakes are really quite good. At number 2, I have At Dead of Night, which is a more recent game on the PC. It does a really great job of blending live action video with CGI, which really gives you this very immersive kind of horror experience. And essentially, you go to stay at this hotel with a group of friends, which we later discover is operated by this psychopath with multiple personalities, who captures all your friends. You manage to escape, but they're all kind of like locked in rooms within the hotel. So your goal is to try and rescue your friends. And the way to do that essentially is to uncover like the stories and the history within this hotel. Because the ghosts of this guy's previous victims are all still here, and you can communicate with them using like this spirit box kind of thing. And then so they all have stories to tell. You have to like wander through the hotel and gather up like evidence, like pieces of things like a weapon, or something else, some other item that tells a story, like a pocket watch or something.
That sounds cool.
And meanwhile, while you're doing all this, Jimmy, who is this antagonist, Jimmy is roaming the halls, like stalking you the entire time. And so what will happen is you'll be just like walking down a hallway, and it's like a point and click kind of thing. So it's not like moving with a joystick or a mouse or something. You like say, I want to go down this hall. You like click it, and it'll like kind of zip forward a bit to the next point. And so what'll happen is like you'll click to the next area, you'll get there, and you'll see him like peeking around a corner at you, and you're like, oh, frick me. And so you turn around quick and go the other way. Because if he catches up to you, he like bonks you, and it's as far as jump scares go, it is one of the better jump scares in any game I've played, because it is a live action video, and it's just like all of a sudden he jumps out at you and like screams at you, and he's like swinging this club at you. But it is great because like sometimes he'll just like all of a sudden be behind you. You'll be like, oh wait, I'm going the wrong way. You'll turn around and he'll be like literally right there and just kill you. So it was really great for jump scares, and just like this feeling of being hunted the whole time. So it just like it literally like you just like jump right out of your seat when he catches up to you. But really cool game. We enjoyed it a lot. And yeah, I would definitely play that again. If the problem is once you've figured out the story, the replayability kind of goes down a bit. I would love to play it again. Like if they came out with like a DLC or something, I definitely would go back to that. So
I was looking that up as you were talking about that, and this looks like on Steam the website is just like people jumping from that guy coming around the corner and killing them.
Right.
So that was cool. But at first I thought you said this was called Dead of Night, so I had typed that in, and I just sent you all the search results for this, which I don't know what this movie is, but it also looks terrifying. Like a killer ventriloquist doll or something, which there's like people gathered. I mean, this looks kind of creepy. Wow.
Okay. My number 2 is a game that I will be amazed if either of you have ever heard of, and that's a shame because it deserves a lot more recognition than it has.
Joke's on you. I'm just going to make it my number 2 right after this.
I'd be happy if you did. It's called it's on PC. I don't know if it's on consoles or not, but it's called Lost in Vivo. The title referencing in vivo therapy, which is kind of an exposure therapy where you're supposed to try to get acclimated to your fears by coming face to face with them. It is in the style of a PS1 game, though it's much more recent. And I usually hate, early 3D style graphics, but this one adds in like modern lighting effects and a decent frame rate, and it actually makes it work. But the story for this one, at least as much as I can say without spoiling how weird and surreal it gets, is you are someone who's undergoing therapy for something that happened in your past. And after a session, one evening, you're walking home with your little, comfort animal, service dog, who is this little, corgi, and it starts raining, and it very quickly starts raining very, very hard, to the point where your dog gets washed into like a storm drain. And because you're not a monster, you find the nearest manhole cover, open it, and you go down to try and find your dog. And the game has some interesting mechanics because one of the first actions that you have available to you, there's a whistle button. So you're in these sewers. There's branching paths that go left, right, all over, and you can whistle. And if you have headphones on, you can hear from what direction your dog is barking. Like he'll answer you. So it's like, okay, you're wending your way through, and it's kind of creepy, but nothing too bad until you whistle, and there's silence, and then something whistles back, and it's just God. Like, oh shit! And that's just the first of the really, really creative scares this game has in store. It's kind of I would have said this until that Silent Hill conference thing they had the other day, but it for a while was the closest thing to a new Silent Hill we would have had until they announced they were actually making new ones. It has that psychological horror element. It's very strange yet very meaningful. It messes with your head. I don't want to spoil like specifics in terms of like some of the crazy stuff it throws at you, but there are fake outs, and it's like a mixture of Resident Evil 7 in terms of the first person view, Silent Hill, and even a dash of like Eternal Darkness thrown in, because it does do things that you wouldn't expect a game to do. But it is a phenomenal game. I think it was only made by a team of like a couple of people, which makes this even more impressive. And it just is a remarkable achievement for, you know, the technical limitations and just what it throws at you. It's a very, very underrated gem, and being that it's so low res, low poly, pretty much any computer can run it. I highly recommend this game. It's just one of the best horror games I've ever played.
I just wishlisted it.
Awesome.
All right, so if I'm doing simple accounting here correctly, you both have one game left. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
That is accurate.
Okay, so I'm going to say my number 2, and I'm going to possibly take a safe bet this isn't either of your number ones based on what's left here, so I may talk about this for a second longer, but my number 2 is going back to Nintendo 64 again, checking for facial registration. Okay. This is Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, which is not the scariest game ever, but definitely had the psychological scares, I think, in spades as you're playing this game. So this is a game where you play a girl named Alex, and you're back again in like the family mansion. And this one's also kind of unique because plot wise, you go through, oh man, I might get the number wrong, but I want to say like 11 or 12 or 13 different characters you play as in this game, each in their own time period and setting. And the stages all look very appropriate to, you know, whatever they're in, Roman centurion to ancient whatever, to the Revolutionary War, to modern day, to different countries of the world, different places. But it's always people that are tied together by the family's history / curse, I guess. And essentially what you're doing, and the meta story here is you're like trying to prevent this, you know, terrible evil from coming and conquering over the world. And it's a very magical based game, which is also kind of fun for a horror game, where you're casting spells constantly, some of which take agonizingly long if they're really complex spells. And they have to be completely unbroken as you do them without enemies coming in your area. Otherwise it breaks the spell and you have to like hit them a few times and run to the other side of the screen and try to do it again. But what made this game probably most famous, I think, in lore and things of this nature now is the sanity effects that took place as the game was playing. So you had a sanity bar as well as a health bar in this game, and as your sanity bar would go down, you were more likely to get these effects that would change the game presentation. Things such as, and I remembered like 10 of these earlier today. I was trying to name these all, and I just found a website. Apparently there's like 50 of these things. I didn't even know there were that many. But some of the common ones would be like your character would walk into a room and like suddenly like your character's legs would just start going like through the floor to like where you couldn't move, and you were like, what the hell's happening here? There was tricks in the game where like your TV screen would go black for like 5 seconds, and you'd just be like, wait, what the hell just happened? Like my game turned off on me? Or like the volume tab would like appear on your screen and the volume would start to go down in the game. Or there was like the channel would switch, or there was even like apparently a blue screen of death. I didn't remember that one. Game would mute itself, but always like putting like the prompt up like an old school TV would be. The rooms could be completely upside down. You could see your character turn into a zombie at certain times. Your limbs would begin to fall off sometimes when you walked into a room. Bugs. Oh yeah, there was like very, especially for the like 64-bit age, very like decently realistic looking like flies that would be on the screen of the game in front of your character, like flying around. Like so many cool things. The game would error and like you would lose everything basically. And there's just so many cool things. So this game like messed with your head in like a way that I don't know if any game did before that. And I haven't played them all, but I would argue probably not many have in ways since this game, where you just question stuff all the time. Like, wait, did the game just break, or is this like supposed to do this? Because a lot of the stuff just didn't happen. I was just reading here too, apparently for a lot of the characters, there are character specific things as well, which I didn't realize, as far as sanity effects. And then also apparently all of these characters also have secondary effects that may or may not happen depending on whether their sanity bar is full or low or like near empty. So there's a lot of different things in here. Like I said, I had no idea I've played this game maybe twice or three times, I would say. But it's kind of fun because there's like the mansion you walk around in, but then at the same time, like the stages, might be activated by like a book you find about some great grandfather you had, and then like you'll go off to do that person's mission, but in a different world. So it's kind of fun though, very like mix of psychological and magic also, which I didn't really think about how magical this game is, but that's not something you typically find in horror either. So super fun one though. Eternal Darkness. This is called Sanity's Requiem, I think. Mm-hmm. I was just reading here that there was apparently a sequel they were going to put out, which I didn't know. This is off topic here, but it even says like when you beat the game in the credits, there's like a trailer for the sequel. I don't remember, but it's called like Sanity's something.
It must be when you get the true ending, because you had to, go through each path, I think, to get the final ending, and I never did that, so I never saw that either.
Well, that's because you didn't try, so there's
that. Yeah, that was I'm certain I never played that game, but I remember hearing about those sanity effects before. That's a really cool kind of breaking the fourth wall kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really kind of unique and very cool.
I'm trying to remember too. Is this Silicon Knights, I think, made this one. I don't know where they are in terms of the world.
Yeah.
So I don't know who has the rights to this game, but I don't think I've ever seen it re-released. So it could be a fun one if they ever redid it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, here we go. We are at our number one spots. So here I go. The game that scared my pants off the most that I've ever played is one that I just played about, I think 2 years ago. I think I played this. Another more modern PC game that I played with my wife again. It is Visage, game that Justin mentioned earlier, and as the review kind of said, he maybe didn't get what was going on with it a bit, but this game absolutely, like, I've never felt like I've never felt more like in danger in a game than I have in this game. Like at all times, like I never felt safe. I was walking around, I just full on anxiety all the time. And part of that for me is because like paranormal stuff is like my number one like horror genre, like subset, which is basically what all of this is for the most part. And so it's essentially, it's as Justin said, it's when people had got that trial for the game PT that was essentially just like a demo for a new Silent Hills game, or at least that's what it was kind of made out to be. Everyone just went nuts for this thing. It was just like a 1 hour demo, but everyone loved it. And Visage is basically the exact same thing. It's like a first person set in a like very realistic, almost photorealistic quality house setting. So right from the start, you're like in this house and you're like, it feels real. Like this is everything, like things are like kind of placed haphazard, like they would be in your own house. And everything that says like photorealistic. So like the wallpaper like looks, like great and things like that. And you get things like the lights will flicker on and off. The phone will ring, the radio turns on by itself. Doors open on their own. You see shadows creeping across doorways, and it was like always like this ghost like stalking you. You feel like, and also you get like elements of the house kind of changing, like as you're moving through it, like things will like be different the next time you go to a room. And you're like, what? This was not here. What the hell is going on? It's just a great atmospheric kind of psychological game. It certainly does have jump scares as well, but the biggest thing in this one was just like the constant fear of feeling in danger that I always got from it. Like there's later on, there's like 4 chapters in it with like a different story. Essentially, you are kind of reliving what happened to these terrible things that happened to other people who had lived in the house previously. And so like you never leave the house, but you like go through a door and you're like suddenly in a hospital. And you're like, what? And so you go to places like outside the house, but you never actually technically leave the house. So you get like crazy things, like just like impossibilities, like mind-bending things as well. Including like near the end, there's like an MC Escher like esque labyrinth of stairways that are like all kinds of angles, like impossibilities. Just great atmosphere. The sounds are top notch. And yeah, I think that's basically, I hit everything in my notes. Just full on like skin crawling terror, this whole thing for me. And this one, like, again, it would be one that would be a little bit tough to go back and replay, because unless you wait long enough to where you forget like the puzzles, it would be hard to replay it again. But definitely I would. So it is terrifying enough for me that I don't know that I would want to relive those feelings, but it was such a good game for me that I probably would. So number 1 for me, Visage.
Yeah, I am definitely going to have to give that one another shot, just because I was not approaching it the way I should have.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like it does not say, oh, here's your quest, go do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, here's a thing in the house. This is kind of weird. Maybe I should explore this further. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if paranormal isn't the thing that really gets you, this game might not be as like, as high on some other people's list. But like I say, for me, that's like my number 1 thing. So.
Gotcha. All right. For those of you who know me, my number 1 pick probably isn't going to be a surprise. But for those of you who don't, it's Silent Hill 2. Which, again, is also getting a remake in the not terribly distant future. But this was the first game in the series I played. And I didn't know much about it. I remember when it came out, it got kind of weird reviews. I knew Pyramid Head was a thing, but I didn't know what he was, how he factored into the story. But eventually I, ended up getting a copy. And knowing virtually nothing about the game aside from one character who was in it. So I loaded up, and it starts with a cinematic of the character you played, James Sunderland, in like a gas station or like a rest stop bathroom, just sort of washing his face and looking very haggard. Go outside, and the narrative starts. And the plot revolves around how you just got a letter, in the mail from your wife, telling you to come meet her in your special place, which is the town of Silent Hill. The only problem is your wife has been dead for 3 years, but someone had to send it.
It's no way to talk about marriage, Justin. Your wife might listen.
But the thing is, someone had to send it, and this is a really unique hook for a horror story. So you go to your special place trying to figure out what's going on, and it gets really weird, but in the best possible way. Like everything in this game is symbolic of something else. Virtually everything. Like, without spoiling anything, like every monster you fight doesn't have a face. There's a reason for that. A character you meet in the town has nearly the same name as your wife, except she's like younger and sexier. There's a reason for that. Like, there's all these things that are just there in the world that if you really want to know what they mean, what they represent, you have to give it some thought. And I appreciate that level of subtle storytelling. The game itself is also just creepy as hell. There's, like Brett said with Visage, there is some impossible geography and architecture at times. There's also, the real world where we are, and every once in a while, usually after some kind of trauma, like you get thrown off a roof at one point, or you get hit really hard, and you'll wake up in this other world that is think the Upside Down from Stranger Things. That's very Silent Hill. But the enemy design is incredible. The Pyramid Head is what he is for a very specific reason, and it still bothers me that he exists outside of this particular entry in the game because there's no reason why he should. I'm not going to say more than that, but he is also very symbolic of something that happened, that has happened in James's life. It's just there are layers and layers and layers to this thing, but there's that, which would have already more or less cemented it as my number one spot. But the fact that it does its scares in very creative ways, that's also what really hit it home for me. Because in all honesty, the scariest part of this game, and perhaps the scariest part of any game I've ever played, is a section where you're not in any immediate danger at all. There's nothing in the room but you. There's nothing pounding at the door trying to get in. There's no immediate sense of, oh my God, I have to get out of here. It takes place in a room with an elevator where you go in, you press the button, and it tells you you're above the elevator's weight limit. You have to get rid of some things. So you go back out into the room where the waiting area, and there's some lockers. So you're like, okay, I'll just get rid of like some of the bigger weapons I've got, some of the heavier things I'm lugging around. Go back into the elevator, press the button. You're over the weight limit. And after like 2 times of this, the realization dawns on you that, oh shit, I have to get rid of everything. I have to get rid of all my weapons, all my health items, my map, my flashlight. I have to be entirely defenseless as I head down into the dark where who knows what the hell is waiting for me. And there's no other option. And that dawned on me, I probably stood in front of that elevator for like a good 5 minutes, just staring at it like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And that right there is just quintessential horror. It's expertly done. And the game is just full of really psychological elements like that. It's pretty much the perfect horror experience in terms of games that I've played, at least.
Must have been a heavy map.
But yeah, you have to get rid of everything in your inventory, and it's just
Did you take your pants off?
It's a perfect moment. What was that?
Did you take your pants off?
You'll have to play and find out.
Probably could have kept the handgun. If you just took your pants off, you could have kept the handgun.
I
didn't think about that, did you?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, well, you didn't have pants on when you were playing it, I see. It's an entirely different thing. Now, that sounds cool. I always wish I had gotten a chance to play the Silent Hill games. Was not to be those. I never got besides Shattered Memories, which I thought about for a brief second, but it didn't make even my considerations at the beginning for this.
That one tells a good story, but it's not really scary.
Yeah, not really scary, but the fun, the stage and the stuff adapting and the enemies adapting to like your choices that you choose with the psychologist was pretty cool, though. I have to say, like the building you go in being a different type of building because of what you chose as an answer is kind of fun.
Yeah, that
was cool. But yeah, I agree. It was lackluster gameplay itself.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it. Wow. Good list, everybody. All right. Well, my number one, I'm not going to have that long of a diatribe about, but it is a special place in my heart. So my number one game is Nintendo 64. Yet again, who knew? Hotbed of all this scary stuff, I guess. This is Resident Evil 2. So I have 3 on my list, but this one makes my list because same reason I just mentioned for Silent Hill, honestly, which was these were not Nintendo games until this one came over to Nintendo. Resident Evil 2 was ported from PlayStation onto the Nintendo 64. And this was kind of like my first chance that I had to own this series that I had only minorly dabbled in before, but was always really, really interested in. Remember, we used to go to Matt Heinzel's house and play like the first 5 minutes of Resident Evil 1 or 2. I forget now. Maybe it was 1 for a couple times. I was like, this game's cool, but then never got more than 5 minutes into it. But this was a sweet one. I was just reading about the comparisons here between the PlayStation version and the Nintendo 64 version, because the biggest difference was PlayStation was on a disc and Nintendo was still running the cartridges at this point. Surprisingly, it says the Nintendo version has basically everything the PlayStation version had, including all the full motion videos, including obviously in game design, everything was the same there. It had surround sound, which I guess apparently PlayStation did not have on their version. And this was one of the few games that took advantage of the N64 expansion pack, which I did have also. And with that pack added onto it, apparently the graphics were actually better on the Nintendo version than they were on the PlayStation version as well, which I had no idea of any of that. So that's just trivia I learned right now. But this is just, I love this series, so it probably was no surprise this was going to be at the top of the list somewhere. It's got such a stupidly convoluted plot, even after the first couple of games, that was like, come on, just show us where the bad guy's at. And what's his name? I'm forgetting his name now, not Wesker. There we go. Is behind the scenes, and the Umbrella Corporation and all these things that kind of started to thread between the games. And this one was just fun just because I remember it was the first one I had a chance to play, like I said, at home. And also started probably my collecting of these games, because when the next generation came for GameCube, I think between myself and a couple that I think Matt Hudson gave me, I think at one point I had one. I never bought two because I had the 64 version, but I had 3, Code Veronica, 4, and 0. I think I had all for the GameCube, which all were worth a fairly good chunk of money as well. Because there just weren't that plentiful. I sold all of them off, I think, except for 4, I believe. But here's a weird thing I just discovered. I was searching for facts about this before it was my turn to talk, and there's a copy of Nintendo 64 Resident Evil 2 on Amazon right now for $60.25 used on Amazon. And I was like, that's bizarre, because I would have guessed it was more than that, to be honest. Yeah. And then I was more curious. I was looking at the seller, and I shit you not, it's sold by Capcom. And I clicked on it, and it's their actual official store. Capcom is selling a used copy of this game on Amazon in 2022.
Wow.
Times are hard.
My mind's kind of blown by that, I'll tell you that. But anyway, yeah, so I don't have a ton to say about this one. I just think like the quintessential go look through a giant creepy manor, or I think this one was the police station technically. You never know what's behind the door. And like, I liked actually was one of the few people that still enjoyed the tank controls when Resident Evil 4 came out. And just like having the fixed camera angles and not knowing what's in the room with you, and just like hearing the groaning or the sighing, and like you knew something was in there, but kind of like you at that elevator, Justin, like I didn't want to move far enough for the fixed camera to switch to the next angle, because I didn't want to know what was in the room with me until I absolutely had to. So that's my number one, Resident Evil 2 original, not the remake. Sorry, all the new people that like the new one.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, this was a fun list.
Yes.
And as I predicted at the start, out of 30 games that we listed between the three of us, only 3 of them were mentioned more than once. So you got a list of 27 different games here. That now I have a nice list that I can farm for my future gaming.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. It just shows like the variety that's out there. And honestly, it's a great time to be a horror fan too, because I mean, just within the next couple of months, there's a bunch coming out, like the Dead Space remake, or The Chant, which is about like a cult on an island, or Signalis, which is a old school sci-fi style one. That's just like off the top of my head. Not to mention like the Resident Evil updates and Silent Hill, re-releases and new games are on the horizon. It's a good time to be a horror fan.
A lot of decent indie stuff out there in this genre now too.
Yeah.
Which I feel like even like 5 or 6 years ago, I was downloading indie horror games, and like I was like not happy with each purchase I made. So
there is a lot of crap out there for the indie scene, but there's some really
I feel like there's some really good stuff now though. Yeah. I see a lot of it on those lists, like I don't even know, like that Nightmare Creatures game might be indie technically, or like a smaller studio, I think.
Possibly,
yeah. I think that's true. Yeah. So, as you might imagine, with the aggregate scores, the top 3 games that we have tonight are the
Capital
only
Storm.
3, the only 3 that were mentioned more than once. It's kind of worked out that way. So, taking the top spot technically tonight with 12 points is Resident Evil 7. Getting 1, what would that be? So it was 4 points. That would be like 6th place, whatever. Anyways, getting 4 and 8 to get 12 points. Next on the list, we have Visage with a 1st place and a 10th place, giving 11 points. And Fatal Frame 2. Actually, well, there's a few games. We got 3 games. We got Silent Hill 2, we got Resident Evil 2, and we have Fatal Frame, all with 10 points. But since Fatal Frame 2 had 2 votes, I'm giving that the 3rd spot.
That's fair.
So
Yeah, that's fair.
that is our list. So, yeah, it's just funny because, like I say, everything, basically every game just got 1 vote. So there's like everything's pretty evenly distributed.
Not a lot of math tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But hopefully, Brett, you said you had a lot to add to your wish lists. Hopefully we managed to do the same for our listeners too, because there's a lot of great horror out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, any closing thoughts for you gentlemen tonight?
No, I was just going to say a lot of mine are older games. Not all of them were, but a lot of them are. So, there's a lot of new stuff out there, like I said before we started, that I know I need to check out. So I'm going to definitely try to get to some games here soon, and maybe I'll include some of these scary ones in there now that I know some of the other games.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, I kind of did mine. It's a good time to be a horror fan. So that was kind of my closing statement, I guess, back then.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, really the same here. We the other weekend when my wife and I were looking at games, we actually were going through like the free games list on Steam, because there's actually a decent number of totally free games to try out. And a lot of these games even have like demos, like a 1 hour or like 30-minute demo. So you can get like a flavor of some of these things. But yeah, looking forward to it. This was a fun list.
Yeah.
And so that'll be it for us tonight on Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. Thank Justin and Cody for being here with us on this one. And this will take us out of here with our usual song. We'll try and get this in some sort of spooky tone, I guess. So, Friends Occasionally Not Disagree.
Ooh, where'd that static feedback come from? Did somebody do that legitimately, or what just happened right there?
I was doing kind of a hoarse whisper, so
no, it's like still going. I think
there's a spirit possessing our podcast at the moment.
Are you taking a poop? Is that the right question to ask it?
Oh boy! Happy Halloween, everyone!
Happy Halloween!
See you next time.